All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everyone to today's product clinic. Today we're going to discuss the prerequisites for the GigaVUE Cloud Suite for Azure. And with us, we have Ron Howard, who's a technical success manager and a professional services engineer focusing exclusively on cloud. Ron is absolutely our top expert at the company on our cloud suite. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you and welcome all.
All right. I just need to go through one slide with some of the logistics for the product clinic. We can go for 45 minutes, so we've got a good chunk of time set aside for the presentation. If any of you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask those questions, and we will do our best to answer all of them during the time that we have together. If we cannot answer your questions live, we will do so in the hybrid public cloud group in the VÜE community. We'll also post any of our answered questions there as well, so they can be available to you to look at later on. We are recording this session, and like all of our product clinics, the video will be posted publicly on the product clinic playlist on the Gigamon TV YouTube channel. And then the last thing is at the end of the session, you'll be prompted for a very short 3-question survey. It's really important that we get some quick feedback from you, as well as any suggestions that you might have for future topics to cover in a product clinic. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, stop sharing, and turn things over to Ron.
Thank you, John. And again, welcome all to this session here on deploying, or actually a deep dive into the Azure environment.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
We see the presenter mode, with the 2 split screen. PowerPoint, lovely PowerPoint.
Let's try this again. Microsoft lied to me on which screen. How's that?
That's perfect. Go ahead.
Take 2, folks. What do you expect on a Halloween day, right? So what we're going to be going over today are some of the major prerequisites and the pitfalls that you might experience during our deployment inside of the Azure ecosystem. Just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing. So we're going to review the prerequisites. We're going to touch on the licensing model. We're going to take a look at the marketplace, the access control, security groups, common pitfalls, and then as time progresses, we're going to do a basic deployment of the solution inside of Azure, and followed by Q&A. So what are the hurdles that we face? Being in professional service and technical success, I've dealt with a lot of customers who get very frustrated, thinking this is going to be simple. And in reality, it is simple, but there's always some type of, let's say, pothole that we run into that can cause a delay. So let's talk about those. So one of the major ones right out of the bat is that you have to subscribe to the Gigamon Cloud Suite in the Azure Marketplace to have a successful deployment. And additionally, if you have a service provider, that service provider needs to be registered for you to be able to actually go through deployment. I've had several engagements where the deployment was delayed due to the fact that the service provider needed to go ahead and subscribe, and that takes around 24 hours for that for that to propagate inside of Azure. Another key element there within the subscribing is using the wrong image. The best recommendation is to use the BYOL. We will be going into the marketplace, taking a look at the different image types and trying to pinpoint exactly which ones we need to use during the engagement. Well-defined IAM policies. Gigamon supports the base ones, and we also do support utilizing custom IAM policies. There are certain variables that are required for a healthy solution to be deployed. It's completely dependent upon your environment, as well as how your solution will be deployed in the environment. Security groups and firewall rules. This is usually the big one. Identifying, is it a TCP port versus UDP port? Do I have the right, am I using an L2GRE tunnel versus VXLAN? Now, Azure in itself doesn't support the L2GRE, so you really only have the solution of utilizing the VXLAN. But do I have that port set properly? Also, do I have my keys? These four here are the big ones. The bottom one, as I touched on previously, is the service provider. But these four here are going to be your biggest gremlin and to keep your deployment from moving ahead smoothly. So let's take a look at the marketplace briefly here. So as I mentioned previously, that if you have a CSP, you need to reach out to Gigamon and we will add that CSP to the partners list, and then that will show up inside of your environment. Additionally, with the marketplace, you want to use the BYOL. If you notice here, I do have the BYOL images highlighted, and just have to be careful because we don't have control over this. In the marketplace, you'll see an intermixing of different versions along with the BYOL. If you do inadvertently install one of the paver versions, there reach out to Gigamon support immediately so that we can contact Microsoft to take care of this and have it reversed. Additionally, with the deployment, when you first subscribe to the service, you need to go ahead and deploy it programmatically where you enable the product line there for your environment. So as you can see here, you click on the Get Smart Programmatic Deployment. You make sure that your subscription there is enabled as signed here. And just for a little blow up, this shows you here exactly what needs to be done. And this needs to be done for each image. So we have the Fabric Manager if you're deploying your Fabric Manager inside of Azure. Also, there's a V-Series node, which is going to be your tap aggregator. There is also a control module, which we call the UCT V controller, which will control the agents that are deployed inside of your environment. The next thing to take a look at is what size of instance do I need to use when I do a deployment? As you see on this screen here, this is the standard recommended sizes for each of the nodes that are deployed. It's important to take into consideration that with your traffic flow, Azure does take a look at that. If you're expecting a higher throughput in your environment, you might want to make the adjustments accordingly. And professional services or Gigamon support is more than happy to work with you to ensure that you are choosing the proper size when you're going through the deployment. Access control or IAM. Here are the basic four fundamental built-in roles that I mentioned previously. We have owner, which is pretty much has the keys to the kingdom. Contributor, reader, user access administrator. Gigamon recommends that if you're going to use one of the built-in roles that you want to go ahead and use the contributor level of access. In the demo that I have set up, I will walk you through the environment and showcase how we have contributor associated with the environment. As stated previously, we do support custom IAM policies so that you're not constrained by using one of the built-in roles that are in the environment. Most people, most companies want to have very constrained, least privileged rule sets. And again, professional services or support will help you in guidance and ensuring that you choose the appropriate policy subsets when creating a policy so that you have successful deployment. Here's a basic topology of what an environment would look like for your deployment. As a user, I would deploy the GigaVUE FM, which is going to be our orchestrator for the deployment. This is the management node that would control the controller as well as the vSeries node. To walk you through the process, a lightweight agent or process will be installed on either a Windows or Linux instance inside of your environment. At that point, it would then register with the controller. And along the same plane, it will also provide health checks so that if the instance goes down, it will be registered there within the Fabric Manager, and you can even use that as a reference point to check the status of communications. Additionally, if you use FM to orchestrate the deployment there inside of your environment, health checks also occur between the controller, vSeries node, and Fabric Manager that will ensure that these nodes stay up and are healthy. After 5 missed heartbeats, FM will attempt to redeploy the instance that has gone down or perceived as going down. So there's minimal management on your side. I have not mentioned it, but you also, for those people who are wondering, do we support third-party orchestration? 100%. That way, with third-party orchestration, your permission sets for your IAM policy are a lot more constrained because you don't need as many privileges. But if you do third-party orchestration, you are responsible for the health and maintenance of the deployed nodes that are within your environment. So once the controller and vSeries node have been deployed and you have an agent installed on your workload, the agent will then register with the controller, which is then registered within the FM to showcase that it is communicating properly. At that point, what will happen is that the traffic will then be split. The agent will identify the information and then route the traffic to the vSeries node. For those of you out there who are familiar with our physical embedded products like our HC nodes or TA or type aggregators, the vSeries node is a virtualized instance of those physical appliances to where all your aggregated traffic will be routed to the vSeries node. And at that point, you have the ability to use different GigaSmart operations and actually route that traffic to your final tool stack, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. We are agnostic as long as you have a routable IP address that can ingest the VXLAN traffic, you're golden. We do support multiple subscriptions so that if you have an environment that spans across multiple subscriptions, tenants, as well as regions, we do support all those different modes of deployment. Again, there are what I would say best practices as far as optimizing your traffic throughput, because you really don't want to be passing traffic from one region to another because there is a cost associated with those inter-region transfers. Here are the base requirement ports for the Fabric Manager. again, that is your management tool, which acts as a single pane of glass to manage the deployment of your cloud suite. Here you can see both the inbound and outbound requirements for your traffic. And one of the things I usually recommend to customers when we're doing deployment is to get your base traffic set up. And then as you have your deployment progress and you have identified IP addresses for your controller and your vSeries node, then you can make adjustments to your network security groups to be more constrained to where you're only seeing that traffic from those identified instances that are deployed within your Azure environment. And here is the protocols that are required for successful aggregation of traffic going in and out of the vSeries node. A prime example, you'll see that the outbound is, we mentioned VXLAN multiple times, how it's UDP. It is so easy to accidentally choose TCP for your tunnel egress going to your tool set and then wondering, why am I not seeing any traffic flows? The answer to that is because since VXLAN traffic is a UDP protocol, it just doesn't know what to do with it, and it'll actually just drop all the traffic right off the bat. Now let's have some fun. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at the marketplace as I promised. So can you guys see the Azure environment here?
Yep, looks perfect.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and start off with going to the marketplace. And let's address some of those caveats that I mentioned earlier. I mean, we all seen PowerPoint slides and death by slides, right? So let's have some fun. So here, I'm gonna go and type in Gigamon. Make sure I don't misspell it. So here's the latest suite for it. And as you'll notice right off the bat, it's like, wait a minute, why is it saying 50? So if I actually click on this here, it'll take me to the full environment. And if you remember the slide that I had previously, this is a replication of that right there where it shows BYOL. So as a new subscriber to it, as I stated previously, I need to subscribe to each and every single one of these instances that has BYOL. The only one that's going to be optional is the proxy here. And if I don't use a proxy, I don't need to subscribe to it. But right now, up until when Microsoft does support native mirroring functions, the controller is required. So let's go ahead and go to the Fabric Manager here. And then if I go ahead and click on Get Started, I promise I know how to use a mouse. You'll notice initially that it will actually be disabled. So you would actually just need to go over here and click on Enabled, and then you're good to go. So one critical point to take into consideration here is that you need to have the appropriate permissions there within the marketplace to be able to subscribe to the service. You will be able to see enabled or disabled if it is already subscribed. But there'll be a nice big banner here, and you will not see anything over here on this side if you do not have the appropriate permissions to be able to subscribe to it. But once you have completed this task, you can actually go through and begin the deployment of your environment. So it's real simple. I'll just go through the process here. So you would just go ahead and click Create. It'll take you to the basic environment. So you choose, make sure you have the appropriate subscription, identify your resource group. I already have one deployed, but I'm just going to go through the process of what I did. I created a resource group entitled Gigamon Resource Group. Next, I want to go ahead and give it a name. What's great is that if you have a name already used, it's not going to let you do that. So what I want to do is go ahead and add a different title set to it so that it's okay. Next thing is I want to make sure that I deploy it in the proper region. Once I have that done, I go down. I have the FM, it already has it defined. The sizing here, if you remember, it's the default recommendation here is going to be the standard D4 V3. Now you can make adjustments to this based upon your throughput, or one of the good examples is that we have a customer that just recently deployed their Fabric Manager in Azure to manage their on-prem environment. Now they have over 300 different nodes deployed, so we would actually want to use a larger instance to handle that overhead. Critical point here where mistakes are usually made is when you have a public key structure here, go ahead and have this defined. You can either generate a new key pair, we'll go ahead and do that, or use one that's already existing. I have one created. It'll give you that. You can actually choose your key. But I'll go ahead and create one just for the heck of it. But you go back to here, generate a new key. You want to choose the RSA. That's because that's what we support currently. So let's give it Gigamon. There we go. Let's have some fun. Halloween. So that's created. The next, let's go to our disk. By default, right now, only one disk has been created. We need two disks. You need a primary OS disk and then a data disk. So I want to go ahead and create an attached disk. I want to go ahead and change the size. You don't need a premium. You can use a standard. The basic is 40. It's going to change it to 64. Now you'll see that that's created. If I ever delete it, the disk, I checked off delete VM, but in your instance, you might want to keep the data disk because the data disk is going to store the MongoDB and all other critical information, and you can always attach that data disk to another instance to bring it back to life. I go to networking. Here, I want to make sure that I put it in the right virtual network, VNet. So I want to go ahead and choose a different one. I chose the visualization. Go next to tags. Personally, I missed something here. Sure, I didn't get anything. Oh, you do have, you can either create your network security groups, or you can use a default one. If you recall, I showed you the basic parameters that are required for your network security group. So if I wanted to go and create one, it'll take me to a page. Then here I can actually go through and identify what my inbound and outbound rules are right out of the gate. Finally, everybody loves tags. Once that's all done, I click review, create. Azure will go through and verify. Oh, wait a minute, it found an error. So let's go ahead and go back to networking. Going through and creating this rule here, the application gateway. I have a feeling it's screaming at me because I already have one created. Let's go back and review and create again. It's nice, fat, and happy at this point. So once this is all said and done, I will just go ahead and create and it'll actually go through and deploy. Since we already have it created, we're not going to do that, but we're going to go back to the home here. So at this point, let's say it went through the deployment. Look at that. I'm all up and running and I can actually log in. So I would log in with the default permission sets. The default permissions can be provided there in our documentation. I've already reset the password. Oops, that would explain why it didn't work. Third time's a charm, right? The only thing that you missed here is the wonderful sign that says here, welcome, and you need to go ahead and approve the settings. So let's talk about the next thing that I promised you, and that was the actual marketplace, or sorry, the licensing portal. So to go through that process, I would go and click on the system cog on the lower left-hand corner. I want to go to licensing for licenses. Here I'm going to choose the FM Cloud, volume active. By default, you have a trial license, but we want to activate a new one for the environment. So the first thing you need to do is go and download the JSON file for your environment. Then I would go over here to the licensing portal. I want to activate this one here. So I go and click activate. If you remember, it's going to ask me for the JSON file. So here I'm going to choose. Go to my inventory. And here's, it has identified the Fabric Manager that I have no cards or physical devices associated with this Fabric Manager. So click continue. It's going to be associated there with the Fabric Manager. If you notice, it's bound by the MAC address 1021. View, activate. We'll go and download the file. Once that's been downloaded, I go and click next. Go ahead and choose my file. Click save. And look at that. Just like magic, we have an active cloud license. If you notice here that they always come with a 45-day grace period. The next thing we want to take a look at, I'm going to go and show you a solution that's already deployed, and then I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to go through the actual deployment process itself. So under virtual orchestrate flows, I will go to Azure. You'll see that I have a successful deployment, that here's my monitoring session. I always like telling a story. So I always have to think about it. Who am I going to hand this off to when I'm done? So the way I work is that monitoring session for MS, what the environment is, and the name of the environment. So go in here, you'll see that I'm actually passing traffic. It takes a little while to complete that, but let's go ahead and delete this and start over. go to our inventory, virtual Azure. Here's the monitoring domain that I did create. I'm going to delete this. So we can all tell a story together. So one of the critical points that we talked about previously that's important is ensuring that Fabric Manager, even though this Fabric Manager is deployed inside of Azure, it still needs to have permission sets to be able to do so. What I did is I created a basic service principal when I went into Azure itself. I opened up the console and I actually generated some commands. So to show you the output, it's going to be required. You know what? Let's just go and have fun and let's go ahead and create one. How's that? So what's going to, in the Azure console, what you're defining is that I'm going into Azure, I'm talking into Azure Active Directory, I'm creating a service principal, I'm creating a specific role for RBAC, and then what is the name? Since I don't want to ruin my existing one that I have functioning, to follow the Halloween. So it's now going to create a role called Halloween. So once you have your role created, you'll need to go into your resource group and then associate this role with either a contributor or your custom rule sets. But once that's done, we're going to use the Gmon one that I had originally. If you'll notice, if I go to settings, credentials, it's been validated. But where I would go and include my Halloween one is I would go ahead and copy Halloween. The name here is going to be, it's critical to use the same name that you used when you created your role, because you can't just create one arbitrarily because it will look for whatever name you created here inside of Azure. I would then apply the tenant. You don't want quotes. The application ID, and the ID is what your name is that you just created. So if you're in Azure, you can actually search for what you just created based upon this ID. And lastly is the password. And you would put this in the application secret. Here's a piece of critical information now. So if I forget to copy this information here to like Notepad or some type of secure key location, it's going to be lost. Because if I were to close this out right now or let the system here time out, I have to recreate this key. What I can do is I can recreate the same one for Halloween, say, for example, but then I would have a different password and a different application ID. That's important to remember because I've had a lot of engagements where it's something simple like this where it has caused a delay. And when you're far along in the game, it's easy to go ahead and go, oh man, I really got off track here. But once everything's okay, your status will change to okay. And let's go ahead and go through what happens. So I go ahead and click new. Here, I can call it whatever I like. So let's call it MD-Azure-GMON. Dang gremlins. So our traffic acquisition right now in Azure is only going to be the agent or orchestrated. This is where you actually third-party orchestration, but in this instance, we're only going to be using the agent. Connection name. Let's just call it connection or con dash Azure. It's a managed service identity. At this point, it's going to be able to pick up the subscription. The region, if you recall, we did this in US East. We want to choose the resource groups. If you recall, we did Gmon, that's a resource group. But if you notice that it had, since it's part of all these different resource groups are part of the same subscription, I can add them. But let's say that I have other subscriptions that I need to add. All I would do is click the add connection, go ahead and choose the same information, choose the different subscription ID, and then go ahead and add those resources. And then I would have communications with the different subscriptions across my environment. Another cool thing that you can do is you can actually go in here and check permissions. Can I communicate? It's a nice little sanity health check to perform while you're going along through your deployment to make sure that you're not making any mistakes and that it minimizes any downtime or delayed deployments. So let's go ahead and click save. So now we're going to go ahead and choose the connection that we made. You want to go ahead and choose visualization. That's where I have it. Here, this is where I need to go ahead and enter in the public key. So if you recall, we generated a key earlier. So what I normally will do is open up PuttyGen to get the public side of it. So here, let me go ahead and load the key. Go to downloads. I want to go and choose all files. Here's the key I created. I want to go ahead and copy everything that's inside of this box here. And just for your peace of mind, this is going to be resolved shortly to where it will go out there and identify the keys that are already in place so that you're not having to do old school and copy the public key into here. But this is also another area where people get hung up because they don't have the key. Let's go ahead and choose our resource group. It's important to choose the management. This is the security group that I created for everybody. Next, I'm going to go ahead and choose the image. It's recommended. In your environment, you're not going to see all these different versions here. You're only going to show what you're actually subscribed to. Since I'm in a lab environment to where we have gone through different iterations of our product, you're going to see multiple versions of our product here. But for your case, you won't. But the benefit also is that if you need to go back to a previous version that you have and you've already subscribed to it, it will show up here. It will automatically choose the default size for you. You can make adjustments on that if you want to increase or decrease the size. I need to go and choose the subnet, the default. Again, if I had a specific subnet defined, I would have a drop down here to show the different subnets. You do also have the ability to install a secure agent there on your environment so that you can add an extra layer of security for your deployment. As you can see, it continues here for the SSH key for the vSeries node. I can also add tags to help identify my environment. And if I have a specific naming convention that I need in my environment, I can apply that here, and I keep adding keys until I have reached all the different requirements. Like we have people that have cost centers, things along those lines that you can add for your tagging. Here, I'm going to go and choose my image. Again, be careful to choose the matching version, because the first one in this instance was 6.1. I wanted 6.8. It automatically chose a good quality default size for me. I need to choose the management subnet. The tool subnet is important to identify where am I sending my traffic to. Again, these drop downs will be populated with your different subnets that you have in your environment. I want to go ahead and use the security group that I defined there with my fabric manager. It's the most verbose. I can again add additional tags for this. Once I've populated the information that I need and I feel satisfied, I can even go back and check my permissions to make sure that I have the appropriate permission set there for my controller as well as my vSeries node. Once I am satisfied and I feel confident that I'm going to be successful, I go ahead and click save. At that point, the information will then start populating across the environment. Also, what's really kind of cool here is that when I do have the agents deployed on my workloads, they will show up here with the IP address. Due to the time constraint, I only did one. If you want, I can have a follow-up session here where I go into troubleshooting and diving into the agents. If you find that of interest, please let John know in the comments section. In the future, you see here now I have an IP address associated for the management of both of those, and it's still launching. So if you recall, when we talked about the network security groups, how we can be more constrained on how we want to pass our traffic. Now that I understand and know what my IDs are for the controller and the vSeries node, I can now go into my NSGs and provide more constrained rule sets. As you can see here, it's already passed the first one. It's fully deployed. It's finalizing the vSeries node. At this time, since it's already complete, what's happening is that it's now going out there and trying to identify any workloads where the agent is installed. Because shortly I will have, and there it is, look at that. We now have a workload that's identified, that's deployed. I can now go to my monitoring session, go to the orchestrated flows, go to Azure, go and click new. Remember, we're telling the story. So here we're talking about the monitoring session, and this is unique for Gigamon. It won't show up in your own environment, so it's just easy to know what's going on when you hand this off to somebody else. I'm choosing my connection. You do have the ability to distribute and to load balance it as needed if your environment grows. Click next. Next step is I want to go and create a map. What type of information do I want to see? So here,
Hey, Ron.
I'm almost done.
Okay, okay. I know, because you're right at time. Okay, cool.
I need 2 minutes.
You got it. Hopefully people can hang out.
Bear with me, folks. The story's almost done, I promise. Here I can apply my rule sets. I click add rule. Here I want to type in, I just want to get version, but I do have the ability to pick and choose a whole bunch of different variables to add or drop different identifiers for my map. I go ahead and click save. I already have a tunnel defined, so I'm going to go ahead and go to tunnels down here just because of time. This is the hard part. You guys ready? Click on the red dot, click drag over to my tunnel endpoint. I click deploy. In about 30, 45 seconds, that will be complete. So there we go. We have now deployed a complete solution within Azure and going over a lot of the pitfalls that you might see during your deployment. John, do we have any questions?
We do have some questions, but we're out of time, so I want to respect that. We'll post the questions and answers in the Hybrid Public Cloud group. So that was an awesome session. Thank you so much, Ron. Great job. Thank you everyone for attending. Please take the survey when you exit the event. And just so you guys know, for the rest of the year, our next session is going to be on Cloud Suite for VMware ESXi, and then we'll finish the year out with a session on Nutanix that Ron will do. So we got some good sessions coming up for the rest of the year. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close things off. Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you all and have a happy holiday.